Hello everybody, my name is Pete Lennox and welcome to the channel. Today I will be reading from Aleister Crowley's book 4. We'll be reading chapter 5, which is entitled Dharana. Dharana basically means concentration. It's the first phase of meditation, and you also learn some visualization techniques. So, thanks for listening and enjoy. Chapter 5, Dharana. Now that we have learned to observe the mind, so that we know how it works to some extent, and have begun to understand the elements of control, we may try the result of gathering together all the powers of the mind, and attempting to focus them on a single point. We know that it is fairly easy for the ordinary educated mind to think without much distraction on a subject in which it is much interested. We have the popular phrase, revolving a thing in the mind, and as long as the subject is sufficiently complex, as long as thoughts pass freely, there's no great difficulty. So long as a gyroscope is in motion, it remains motionless relatively to its support, and even resists attempts to distract it. When it stops, it falls from that position. If the earth ceased to spin around the sun, it would at once fall into the sun. The moment, then, that the student takes a simple subject, or rather a simple object, and imagines it or visualizes it, he will find that it is not so much his creature as he supposed. Other thoughts will invade the mind, so that the object is altogether forgotten, perhaps for whole minutes at a time, and at other times the object itself will begin to play all sorts of tricks. Suppose you have chosen a white cross. It will move its bars up and down, elongate the bar, turn the bar oblique, get its arms unequal, turn upside down, grow branches, get a crack around it, or a figure upon it, change its shape altogether like an amoeba, change its size and distance as a whole, change the degree of illumination, and at the same time change its color. It will get splotchy and blotchy, grow patterns, rise, fall, twist and turn. Clouds will pass over its face. There is no conceivable change of which it is incapable, not to mention its total disappearance and replacement by something altogether different. Anyone to whom this experience does not occur need not imagine that he is meditating. It shows merely that he is incapable of concentrating his mind in the very smallest degree. Perhaps a student may go for several days before discovering that he is not meditating. When he does, the obstinacy of the object will infuriate him, and it is only now that his real troubles will begin. Only now that will comes really into play. Only now that his manhood is tested. If it were not for the will development which he got in the conquest of asana, he would probably give up. As it is, the mere physical agony which he underwent is a veriest trifle compared with the horrible tedium of Dharana. For the first week, it may seem rather amusing, and you may even imagine you are progressing. But as the practice teaches you what you are doing, you will apparently get worse and worse. Please understand that in doing this practice, you are supposed to be seated in asana and to have a notebook and a pencil by your side and a watch in front of you. You are not to practice at first for more than 10 minutes at a time, so as to avoid the risk of overtiring the brain. In fact, you will probably find that the whole of your willpower is not equal to keeping to a subject at all for as long as 3 minutes, or even apparently concentrating on it for so long as 3 seconds, or 3/5 of 1 second. By keeping to it at all is meant the mere attempt to keep to it. The mind becomes so fatigued, and the object so incredibly loathsome, that it is useless to continue for the time being. In Frater P's record, we find that after daily practice for 6 months, meditations of 4 minutes and less are still being recorded. The student is supposed to count the number of times that his thoughts wander. This he can do on his fingers or on a string of beads. If these breaks seem to become more frequent instead of less frequent, the student must not be discouraged. This is partially caused by his increased accuracy of observation. In exactly the same way, the introduction of vaccination resulted in an apparent increase in the number of cases of smallpox. The reason being that people began to tell the truth about the disease instead of faking. Soon, however, the control will improve faster than the observation. When this occurs, the improvement will become apparent in the record, Any variation will probably be due to accidental circumstances. For example, one night you may be very tired when you start. Another night you may have headache or indigestion. You will do well to avoid practicing at such times. We will suppose, then, that you have reached the stage when your average practice on one subject is about half an hour, and the average number of breaks between 10 and 20. One would suppose that this implied that during the periods between breaks one was really concentrated, but this is not the case. The mind is flickering, although imperceptibly. However, there may be sufficient real steadiness even at this early stage to cause some very striking phenomena, of which the most remarked is that which will probably make you think that you have gone to sleep, or it may seem quite inexplicable, and in any case will disgust you with yourself. You will completely forget who you are, and what you are doing. A similar phenomena sometimes happens when one is half awake in the morning, and one cannot think what town one is living in. The similarity of these two things is rather significant. It suggests that what is really happening is that you are waking up from the sleep which men call waking, the sleep whose dreams are life. There is another way to test one's progress in this practice, and that is by the character of breaks. Breaks are classified as follows. Firstly, physical sensations. These should have been overcome by asana. Secondly, breaks that seem to be dictated by events immediately preceding the meditation. Their activity becomes tremendous. Only by this practice does one understand how much is really observed by the senses without the mind becoming conscious of it. Thirdly, there is a class of breaks partaking of the nature of reverie or daydreams. These are very insidious. One may go on for a long time without realizing that one has wandered at all. Fourth, we get a very high class of break, which is a sort of aberration of the control itself. You think, how well I am doing it. Or perhaps that it would be a rather good idea if you were on a desert island, or if you were in a soundproof house, or if you were sitting by a waterfall. But these are only trifling variations from the vigilance itself. A fifth class of breaks seems to have no discoverable source in the mind. Such may even take the form of actual hallucination, usually auditory. Of course, such hallucinations are infrequent and are recognized for what they are. Otherwise, the student had better see his doctor. The usual kind of consists of odd sentences or fragments of sentences which are heard quite distinctly in a recognizable human voice, not the student's own voice or that of anyone he knows. A similar phenomena is observed by wireless operators who call such messages atmospherics. There is a further kind of break, which is the desired result itself. It must be dealt with later in detail. Now there is a real sequence in these classes of breaks. As control improves, the percentage of primaries and secondaries will diminish, even though the total number of breaks in the meditation remains stationary. By the time that you are meditating 2 or 3 hours a day and filling up most of the rest of the day with other practices designed to assist, when nearly every time something or other happens and there is constantly a feeling of being on the brink of something pretty big, one may be expected to proceed to the next state, Dharana. And that is the end of Chapter 5. Thanks for listening, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe.